All right.
Are we actually live now? God forbid.
We are live.
Oh,
Hi,
sweet
everyone.
Jesus. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Uh, oh, wait.
It's
Okay, there we go.
that
Yeah, there
time
we go.
again. Are
I
we actually live
accidentally
now?
left the
God
stay
forbid.
tuned graphic on. Not anymore.
Live.
Oh,
Whoa,
sweet
God.
Jesus.
Oh, God, I
Hi,
hear us.
everybody. Yeah, by the way, I hear you
Okay.
you right now, and it's freaking me out.
Okay, I got it.
Oh
Sorry,
my
that was
God,
that was a
got
whoops.
real weird.
That was whoopsies.
Woo.
Too many.
Good
so
luck
much.
having a podcast listening to us from the past like 10 seconds ago.
Well, it was
Oh,
like
boy.
it was complicated. It was technical issues
That was so
beyond
bad.
your wildest comprehension.
I would still argue that you can bump us up. Well, actually, I don't know.
I could bump us up.
Well, you can bump me down, maybe bump you two up. I don't know.
You don't bump down.
I don't know. Who cares? Hi, everybody.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Random Respawn, where we talk about gaming news, gaming things, and gaming stuff. I'm Josh Raptor.
And
I'm Caleb White.
I'm Graham Marshall. We're going back to this mode now.
so.
Okay.
I'm
Well,
kind of flustered
like to mix it
from the echo. So
You're just really flustered by
Hello, Timmy Obi. Welcome.
is it Ob or Obi?
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a
Could be
really good point. It could be either.
either.
Call you Obi? Like
Either.
Moby?
Could be either.
Either or. Okay.
Ether.
So welcome to another
Welcome,
Monday
welcome.
where we talk about gaming news, gaming things, and gaming stuff. And we are your best Bachelor pregame show.
Yes.
I was about to say. We're gonna
we
turn the
filled that.
Bachelor
That's
joke?
right.
We filled that nice niche.
I believe it's Nietzsche.
Totally.
Nietzsche.
And so
Nika. That nice Nika.
yeah. On
Hold on.
today's
Hold on, guys. I'm looking at our Slack right now to be like, wait, what are we supposed to be talking about today?
I
have
was
to look
just
over
about to
this.
say that.
Shh, no, it's fine.
Obey.
It's Obey. Nice.
Obey. Oh, nice.
Tonight we're talking about horror games and what makes a game scary. We were gonna share some stories / examples of our scariest and or most disturbing games. What makes things scary just in general, atmosphere, environments, game types, and do game mechanics help or hinder sometimes the scary element of things? And what are some games that have tried to be scary and failed, and why did they fail? And all this came up because of a Scorn trailer, the newest trailer Marshall sent to us about 2 weeks ago. And he was like,
That was
guys,
actually.
I haven't seen this trailer yet. I'm so glad to hear something about this trailer. And I hated it. I thought it was awful. I thought it was garbage, and it wasn't scary.
It's not supposed to. That game isn't really supposed to be like a horror game.
It
More
says
like,
horror.
It literally
But no,
says
no, no,
survival
but
horror on the
It's
website.
literally called like
in, like-
Scorn,
but in,
survival horror
Yeah.
game. Like,
But here's
it
the thing: it's
says
supposed
horror.
to be in the vein of like H.R. Geiger or Giger. Is it pronounced Giger?
It's a
I
Geiger
actually-
counter.
Whatever.
It is a.
But it's supposed
It's a
to be in
Giger
that.
counter, Josh.
Is it really? Shut up! I hate both of you so goddamn much. But it was always supposed to be in that vein of like body horror, but not in like a spooky jump scary type of horror. I mean, it's just
It
supposed to
doesn't
look
do
weird.
either.
Yeah, but then
It's just
then it's
supposed
not
to
horror.
look weird and creepy,
And that's
like-
fine. It can look well. So that was actually my thing, was that they're pushing this as a survival horror game, and it's on their website. It says this is a survival horror game.
Yeah, I mean,
And so I was trying to do a crappy breakdown, but nothing happens in the trailer. And so
nothing really happens. And again, there's literally that trailer and like a previous one that shows just a lot of concept locations and all that. So that trailer was literally the first place that actually showed like gameplay. So like in terms of spookiness,
Gameplay.
yes, quote unquote gameplay. But like there was really not a whole lot that happened, but it was just mostly like a showing off like the environment and like just the general gameplay.
Right.
Not
So-
a lot that happened is
Not
is
a
a,
lot
is
that
a,
happened.
is an,
overstatement.
yeah,
But
is the overstatement of the year.
That's a gross
Nothing
overstatement.
happened. The reticle changed colors at one point, and I was like, whoa.
Whoa.
So back to the point. So Marshall sends this
Yeah.
to us, and he's like, I'm pretty pumped about this game. It looks
I'm
creepy.
excited for it just because.
And
like,
so I
it
was
looks weird.
doing a crappy breakdown of it, and there's no gameplay. And then I saw that this came out 4 months ago, and Marshall had just found it.
Yeah, I mean, I literally hadn't seen
New.
anything.
And so
gameplay.
the whole crappy breakdown and being topical was completely out the window. But luckily, I kind of started on like what makes a horror game scary, and kind of like what makes things scary in general. And Caleb and I were kind of working on a script, and then we're like, oh, this would be a good topic. And so I still plan on making this video, but now I have to incorporate the not topical Scorn trailer that has been out for almost half a year into this thing.
Hush.
But
ages old,
right.
literal ages.
Look, I saw the trailer and I panicked. Okay, like
New
trailer, guys. It's only been out for 3 years.
Hush.
We get. He's sending us a trailer for Silent Hill 2, guys. This new video game is coming out, and it is blowing my
Silent
mind.
Hills, and I just didn't know.
Right,
guys.
So
PT, it's a thing. Look at this trailer.
yeah, PT. It's
Great,
guys,
awesome new game.
have you guys seen the Sync Baby in PT? It is the newest thing I've ever seen.
Oh my god.
So that's how we got on tonight. And I also a little bit. I just finished Doki Doki Literature Club. And if you haven't played it, it's free on Steam and Mac.
Oh, you finished it?
Yeah, it's not a very long game, and it doesn't have much of a replayability.
It's a visual novel. I mean, at the very core of it. So you're not going to get a whole lot out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
But there are some options, and I don't necessarily want to spoil really too much about it for the people who are watching this right now, which is 5 people. No. Yeah, 5 people. 5 people. Wow, look at that.
I'm going to download it right now. I didn't know it was on Steam.
Yeah, it's free on Steam. And
are you going to get the fan pack?
I did not get the fan pack. I think it's just with different... mostly, I think it's just like some different artwork and the soundtrack, and both of which... The soundtrack is kind of neat, because at the very end...
oh, yeah.
What they...
I thought it was like
what they do with these kind of like the typical piano music that you hear, they kind of do something with it, and it's a little bit creepy. But as the game goes on, things start getting like a little bit more and more crazy, and then it gets to a point where I'm like, this is absolutely insane, and it doesn't peak too early. It actually did. It was almost at the point where I was like, this is just a really boring dating simulator, like anime dating simulator, and I don't even care about those in the first place. Everyone just keeps saying it's not. Is anime dating simulator, and so
it's not that. Yeah,
they were right. It's not it. It peaks, and then it kind of does a thing where it's. I can't get. I don't want to get too much into it.
I just want to read the Steam description of it, because it's pretty great, and it says, wait, I'm hearing myself again. Oh god,
what's going on?
That's on you. That's not on me.
Okay. All right. So it says on there, and it's got the picture scrolling by on Steam, which are just like of the anime girls, like the dating sim. It looks like any other dating sim mobile game that you've seen out there. And it says the Literature Club is full of cute girls. Will you write your way into their heart? This game is not suitable for children or those who are easily disturbed.
Yeah, that's it. That's all it said. Yeah,
throws that out there at the end. It's like, oh,
right.
Oh,
okay. Yeah, and actually,
what's up?
Oh no, that's actually how the game starts. It's just like, this is not suitable, and then it's like, wow, all these cute girls are always fighting over me, and then it turns.
It goes south.
Right. Josh, to your point that it's not really like all like disturbing for you or scary, I think it's simply because the entire game is based around it. So it's like, there's something that's gonna happen, so you're already kind of anticipating it.
Well, no, not even that. It's like it's like that they keep bringing up these warnings, but they play so long that, like, as a normal dating sim, that it gets to the point like where you almost like forget, like it like
you're
wears
like
you down.
Into it.
And then yeah, go ahead.
I was about to say, like, the thing is, this isn't the first game like this that's done that as a visual novel. Like, I can't remember the name of it. It came out a good couple of years ago. That I think I would say did it a lot better, because it wasn't the focus. You literally had to work to get to that like thing that Doki Doki also tries to do. But I think it did it better simply because it wasn't the main focal point. It was something that like you actually had to work for, and it would really screw with your game once you got to that point. and like you had to like repeatedly play the game multiple times for it to actually trigger, essentially. And again, we can't talk about what it is, quote unquote, because you'd literally be spoiling Doki Doki if that's the case.
Right. Yeah. So just
I'm gonna play.
after that, and like I did think like there's a couple things that happened in it where I was like, this was messed up, but then it kind of like gets so messed up to the point where it's not comical. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't laughing at it, but it almost like when it was still kind of in like the realm of like realness and like it was real, but like also like crazy at the same time. It was a little bit more scary than when it went like full crazy.
Oh yeah.
And so I think that's actually a great thing to bring up. Let's go ahead and talk about games that started off really being scary to us, and that's also a thing.
Started off.
Well, so to me, a game is only scary for so long until you kind of like see the main villain or whatever, because at that point it has a face and you can take care of it. It's that mystery
Yeah.
and that intrigue. And so to be a horror game is like really hard because you
Mhm.
can only truly be scared the first playthrough. I mean, afterwards, unless there may be a different jump scare, but it's like you kind of know the beats and everything like that. And so it's like,
Yeah.
a real good scary movie isn't one that has jump scares, because that is literally 100% an actual reflex. It's your fight or flight reflex. Something just literally screams at the TV and they purposefully jack up the volume, and you literally can't help but jump. But then literally right after that, you're just like, it was just a jump scare. It has no lasting effect. But it's like, it's those movies
Mhm.
where you're sitting there and you're like, junk is going down and you don't know what's happening and it's really
Yeah.
freaky. And then it kind of leaves you thinking afterwards. But then the next time you watch it, you just kind of hope that it's like still a good movie, because that whole fear aspect of it is like basically completely gone since you know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the classic reference of Jaws. I mean, there's some jump scary moments in Jaws, but that also, if you're watching that for the first time, especially if you're a little kid, it's like makes you really afraid of the water for a little while
Makes you
afterwards. You're
afraid
like,
of going into your own
Pool,
pool.
right?
Makes you
I
People
afraid
are
of
don't
going
afraid to
into your
really
take
own
want to
baths.
go.
bathtub.
Yeah.
I don't really want to go do that. Like,
Yeah, not
I'm
take a
good.
bath.
It sticks with you for a little while. And man, some people longer than others, some people shorter than others. But that's definitely like the sign of something that's good horror is it really digs under your skin and gets to you
Oh yeah.
after you finish watching the movie.
And most horror that is very good is that it doesn't take something super duper crazy. Like Scorn is just completely just off the walls crazy. And so it's kind of like you're like
Mhm.
everything is
Oh
crazy.
yeah.
You kind of mentally expect everything. Whereas like Jaws, um, it's a shark. You know what a
It's a
shark
big
is. You
shark.
you know
It's
what
a
a beach
really
is.
big shark.
These are things that you actually know and are somewhat familiar with, and then you're like, well, the beach is supposed to be a safe space. This thing literally lives in the ocean. It could get me at any time, and that's scary.
Very
Silent
much so.
Hill is freaky because you basically wake up in a town that's kind of normal, but it's like ripped from the world, which is like freaky in itself. It's like if you try to leave, it's not even like it's an invisible. It literally looks like someone just grabbed it and ripped it from this world, and it's just there, and you're alone with it. And then it gets freakier when you find more people are part of it. So it's like it's its own entity of craziness that some people are stuck in.
Very much
Yeah,
so.
exactly. I mean, that's the big thing with like Silent Hill. That's the big thing about like atmosphere and horror and when it's effective is it has just enough of the real or the relatable that you get attached to it and you're like, oh yeah, okay, this seems normal and okay, and then it's like, wait, that's really not normal, and it turns stuff on its head. It's like that subversion that really makes it effective
If I
horror.
can also make a jumping point from Silent Hill, one of my favorite things that they ever did was in Silent Hill for the Room. Gameplay was apparently wasn't really that good, but one thing that happened as you progressed through the game is your apartment. You're locked in your apartment, and as you go through the game, because there are holes in your apartment that you can go through, that you end up in Silent Hill. Your apartment becomes more hostile as the game progresses, where like you will start taking damage in your apartment. You can die in your apartment. It's like this, it's taking this safe location that you're so used to, and it goes, no, 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 you're not having that anymore. Another game that also did that, I believe it was one of the what's that series called with the with the photography
Oh, on the
camera?
Wii,
Not just on
Shutter,
the Wii,
Fatal
but
Frame.
Fatal
Fatal Frame. Thank you.
Frame.
I think it was either 3 or 4 where you had a like an apartment or a house that you always were in before all the missions, but then later on, like the entity or whatever that was stalking you, I guess, throughout the whole game started showing up. And one of the best ones is I can't remember who it was, but it was a very famous video of these guys playing it and they're super scared of the game. And they're passing by the bathroom and it's for like a split second because they panic and run past it. The spirit is literally starting to come out from the mirror, the bottom of the mirror, as if she's about to try and climb out, and they panic and they run away and they come back and it's gone. Like, and again, it's because the entire time your house has been safe from all the crap that you've had to deal with up until a certain point. Then the game goes, nah, not anymore. Enjoy that. I
Yeah.
always thought games like that like do it super well. Like they give you a nice spot that's like this place is a nice good spot that I don't have to worry about anything, and then rip the rug right out from under you and go, hey, not anymore.
Yeah, for sure, and especially if they well, if it's a game like that, it works well where like that's your safe place. But it's also like really effective if they only do it a couple times.
Yeah.
Yes,
So it
very
always
much
keeps
so.
you where it's like, oh shit, I don't know anymore. Like because that's one of the things that can make games not scary and can really hurt horror is because games are based on like mechanics and rules. And so once you figure out the rule or behind things, you're like, oh, okay, well, nothing attacks me in elevators because it's the game can't handle
It's
it because this is a
loading.
loading
Yeah.
screen. So like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm safe here. And then all of a sudden the game's like, oh yeah, shit, here's something in an elevator. You're like, ah, it
Mhm.
freaks you out because you're like, wait, no, that's not a rule that I can follow anymore. It breaks that.
Or
And Dead Space, which wasn't a extremely horror game, but it was creepy in some ways. And I don't play very many true to form horror games because they freak the
No,
shit
you
out of
do
me.
no,
So
you
not.
do not. You don't like
I don't.
scary
I stay
movies.
away. But Dead Space was one, and it's a horror esque, and there's a lot of jump scary moments in it, and there's just lots of creepy monster things. But one of the times that it is really scary is or one of the real scares that then sticks with you for the rest of the game is that one time there's a dude who attacks you while you're on your crafting bench.
Yeah, yeah. It only
That
happens
one
once.
jackass,
Time.
yep.
It only happens once. Like every other time in the game, when you get to the crafting bench, like you're safe. There's nothing around you. Nothing breaks. Because in this game, stuff busts through the ventilation shafts all the time. Like that's definitely something that they do. You enter a room and like nothing's there, and you turn a corner and then boom, something jumps out behind you through this ventilation shaft, and you're like, oh shit. But it's never happened before. Like once you've cleared a room and gone over to the working bench, like it's been fine. But this one time you're there, and then there's a dude right behind you, like, oh fuck,
Yeah.
like so scary,
Yep.
and then it
It's
makes you afraid of every bench
Yeah.
after
right.
that.
And it's
And I'm pretty sure that he didn't spawn in the room. He spawned in the room next to it, and then
Yeah.
and so you don't hear it,
no,
and
no, no.
he'll just
It's
calmly
not
walk up
that.
to you,
It's
and he will attack you while you're still on the bench. It doesn't
no.
matter if you get off of it.
I don't think it will. I think that it is purposefully there. It only
Maybe
triggers when you go to that bench, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like when you're at if you don't go to that bench, you will never get that. It is that specific bench at that area. If you go to it the very first time, and then it kind of zooms in, you're doing your thing, and the second you zoom out, it is just there like this
you
with its arms.
see
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
behind you. You go, ah, crap.
Yeah.
Hold on. Wallace in chat actually has a question. He says, "What do you think about the atmosphere from Stalker?" That was for me, the first WoW game. Have any of you guys played Stalker besides me?
Yes, it is
I played for like 5 minutes.
good.
And it wasn't because I didn't like it. I
It
just I
is
don't
a
know.
Slavic magic game where sometimes that game does not work properly, and other times it's pretty great. That game, there are parts of that game. It is like you are in the thick of it, and some stuff can happen. And like there are some creepy creatures in that game, and they don't appear like all the time. It's only like sometimes. And I think one of the better examples for that is when you've been in the sewer system for long enough and you're dealing with the invisible bloodsuckers, like vampire like creatures that inhabit it, and they take a lot of bullets and all that stuff. But then you
Mhm.
finally get to the top after dealing with a bunch of like mercenary guys as well, and you have to get a key for like the sewer grate up top, and then you're like, oh crap, how do I get out? And then you hear something, like you hear like a moan or something, and it's a long hallway, like a long pipe system, and you turn around to see it, and you see this thing walk out from where you came from, and then he does this attack. It's a completely a mind attack where he hits you with it, like you hear like a white noise build before it hits, and then the camera zooms in right into it, and you can't really see because he's in shadow, and he hits you with it. It scared the crap out of me the first time it happened, and it's like one of the only times it happens too. It's like you only run into this thing like once or twice in the
Wow.
entire game. It's oh my god, it's so good.
So that's
Yeah.
we're gonna really get into atmosphere in a little bit, but it's just so Stalker has great mechanics. You know what I
Yes.
mean? The shooting, the walking, it feels great. So does Half-Life 2, and there's one particular level that is freaky
Oh
beyond belief.
yeah.
We
And
don't go to
Yeah.
Ravenhole anymore. Yeah.
right, yeah, Ravenhole. And so you've got these games that are mechanically fantastic. Even the Fear series, the second and third one weren't, but the first. We'll just talk about the
First
first
one,
Fear.
very much. Yeah.
3R.
Yeah,
Stop it. We don't talk about
for
3R.
3R. So those games are mechanically insanely sound, but they're scary as anything. But then you've got Silent Hill, where the mechanics are awful. It's
Yeah.
impossible to like run straight, especially in the first one. You can't shoot worth anything, but in a weird way, it adds to it. It's almost like
Oh
Yeah.
no,
not
that's
being
yeah. I'm
able
pretty
to
sure that's like the whole point.
right, not being able to hit anything with a gun. It's like you're a regular guy. It's like why would you know how to use a gun really well? You know what I mean? It's not like it's not like Gordon Freeman. And it's kind of like I feel like on the same level with Dead Space is like Isaac is just an engineer. It's like, and
He's just some dude.
he's just some dude. And then taking down all of these guys and him being just that guy sometimes feels out of place. Whereas like
Yeah.
Silent Hill, you're there because of an accident when the first one, and then the second one when you purposely go back is because your dead wife calls you and you're like, this is jacked up.
Yeah.
Um,
There's a lot of good stuff in Silent Hill too that like is the reason why it's considered the best one out of all of them. But
yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So it's like there seems to be there like for those there are like real reasons, fear. You're part of a combat team that is made to deal with paranormal stuff, and then you end up kind of
Mhm.
being weirdly incorporated into the plot in like a freaky way when you make
When things happen.
and then in
When
the other
things
one
go awry.
and then but in the future ones where you make
Yeah.
ghost babies
Oh.
that was
Yeah, but I wanted to talk about this though in particular because I think that it's because game mechanics are so much better now than they were back when Silent Hill 2 was released, Silent Hill 1. I think it makes you have to change the genre of horror game almost to be a lot more effective. Like you have to be much more limiting to the character in ways like you are in Amnesia or in the Slenderman games, where you don't like you have a character and it moves and everything, nothing feels clunky really, but you can't do anything.
Yeah.
You are literally a powerless character because
Yes.
if once you introduce a way for the player to deal with enemies in today's world, it's hard to make a game with really broken controls or mechanics. Like it just
Mhm.
we don't accept that anymore. But the older games, you could get away with that because it might have been the best that you could do at the time, and
Mhm.
maybe it wasn't.
Tank
But
controls.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
tank controls were great for that genre because it's like, okay, I can deal with it, but can I do it fast enough? And now I'm kind of panicking, and now
Yeah.
these damn controls and I can't get it. And,
Here's the
oh
thing,
god,
tank controls still kind of work to this day if you really want to go back down that
yeah,
route. Like tank controls are still fine. Like nothing really wrong with them. It
yeah.
just adds a layer of like you have to plan ahead like a couple like by 5 or 6 seconds because that can really screw you over if you're not.
Right. And I think that the mechanics of a game and the controls especially really play a big hand into horror games. And it's one of the reasons why I think that for me third person games are much less scary than first person.
Yeah, I
because
can agree with that.
you can see so much more and you can see around your character a lot more, and there's ways for you to observe things with a better field of view, and you can get yourself into situations where you're a little more comfortable with your surroundings. Whereas in a first person game, they can really make it lower the FOV, even if you change the settings. Like they can lower it down, and you can't see much, and there's always going to be this huge space that you can't see behind you.
Hmm.
And games like one of the games that I actually did play and is probably not even that scary to a normal person, but Condemned, the first one,
Oh,
scared the piss
dude.
out of me. That
Yeah.
game was
Was that
so
with the bear
scary.
fight? Was that what
What's that?
the
No,
bear
that was
fight?
the second
That
one,
was the
the
second one.
bear
That's
fight.
right.
That
Yes.
was the
Yeah.
second one had the bear though. The
Well, the
bear
first
fights.
one had like the mannequin shop. That was one of
Oh,
the
right.
memorable like places in that game where you're going around and you
Mhm.
know that that's like the third level or something. So you're pretty familiar
Yeah.
with how dudes can just show up and like start beating the crap out of you. But then occasionally there are dudes that are just standing there looking like the mannequin, and then they'll fall out and they start to attack, and you're like, oh god! And then later, the mannequins themselves start moving around, and they don't ever attack you, but they move, and so
Yeah,
like
when you're
you're
having like a psychological break
yeah,
and it's like they start forming around you to funnel
it's-
you in an area and it's like, oh
yeah.
no, don't like it. Nope.
Yeah, it's so terrifying. And that game too benefited from the controls thing because it wasn't like the controls weren't that great. And you did get some guns, but they only had like 3 bullets ever at a time. You couldn't really get a whole lot of ammo. And you mostly had just melee weapons, and they would break after a couple of hits, and it was pretty awkward to actually have combat. So it never really felt like a good idea to engage, even if you
Yeah,
could. And that's what really, for me, that really works for
very
scaring me.
much.
When I feel completely powerless, I'm like, I don't want. No, I'm not doing it.
Sound works super well in that game
Right.
because of the footsteps and all
Yeah.
that stuff. Like it
Well,
was
Oh yeah, the
really
footsteps too.
good on point. Oh yeah,
it's
very much.
it's interesting that you say that because I feel like just traditionally some of the scariest games to have come out have not been first person.
Mm,
Because the Silent Hill games are not first person.
true.
Resident Evil is not first person. Eternal Darkness was not first person.
Yeah.
That's true.
And they're all super terrifying, but it's
and
almost
and they're much more terrifying in the true horror like psychological sense.
oh
I
yeah.
think Condemned is much more of just like it's a scary game, it's a jump scary kind of.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's one that really makes you terrified to go somewhere in your house where like Eternal Darkness was absolutely insane.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, very
And
much so.
very much more deep horror.
Um,
Yeah.
So in that sense, yes. um I'm I guess it's like my ability to play a I'm much more likely to be able to play a third person horror game
right.
than I am a first person one.
Though I would say another game that actually you can play both in first and third person that actually is not a scary game by nature, but there is
Fallout.
one level. Thief, Deadly Shadows. Do you know the
Oh.
Cradle?
Are, are
Do you know anything about
are
the
you talking about
Cradle?
the reboot or the original?
The original.
Oh,
No, not Thief.
Thief.
That
The
yeah.
fourth.
Yeah, the fourth. Yeah. What was with companies just throwing the number in the name and like, no, that's not how that works.
Yeah,
Um,
it is.
but in Thief Deadly Shadows, there was the Cradle, which was the whole point of Thief was you go into locations to steal stuff and not be seen and all that. But the Cradle was specifically like an old abandoned like church that was turned into like a psychiatric facility. And like this is like during like medieval kind of era style. And you go into it and all that stuff, and then you realize you can't get out, and you're like, why? But then you realize it's because like you find the thing that you were looking for, and it's like, oh, and then a spirit starts talking to you. You go, what? And then you have to end up going through an area that's like full of, and you don't see anything like that could kill you. Like that was the one thing up until that point is there are guards in locations, and they can kick your ass because you are weak and you are god awful at fighting. But up until like that point, like there was nothing there. It's like everything's like nothing until like maybe 20, 25 minutes into the level. And then you finally see something and it doesn't really look human. And then you like, you panic because you're like, what the hell is that? And you go into like super hardcore stealth. Don't let it see me. Don't let it see me. Don't let it see me. It's terrifying, especially like for people who back in the day did not know it was in that game. And I think many games that do that, where they'll have a scary level, I think works so much better because you don't expect it. And usually like they can pull off like jump scares and stuff like that, that horror games overall don't really do super well because you're expecting it and it's for the whole game. For this, it's this one little thing you're like, I need to get out of here because this is spooky for me. I want to go back to how the game used to be. Please get me out of here.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's actually something like when you're talking about jump scares and stuff like that. When Fear did that, every single time you go down a ladder, you
It's
literally like look down, turn around, and then like slowly go down. And every single time you're like, something's gonna be here.
And it only happened once. It
And
was
it's
early in the game, and that was it.
right. It
And it's
happens.
still one of the best jump scares
It is one of
because
the
it's like,
best, but it doesn't. I think it's actually even between like levels, if I remember correctly. So it's not even like you turn around and you're like, oh, I'm fine. But then as you just keep going down, there's like a spot between them, and then this creepy girl's there, and you're like, oh,
it works because your mind's already preoccupied because when you turn around to go down the ladder, you see Alma, the little girl.
yeah,
And you go, oh, that's creepy. And you're thinking about it. And then when you get down, then you turn, you see what's his face, literally like
oh yeah, like
5 feet
yeah,
in front of you, walking calmly towards you. And then, of course, naturally, you panic and you shoot everything
Yeah.
at him. Like it's
Mhm.
so good. That's when jump scares are the best. Is when they throw something at you to preoccupy your mind to try and like not think about what you're trying to do, and then they hit you and then they blindside you with it.
Yeah.
Those are the best kind of jump scares, not the ones that you are expecting. Like that's a cheap one. But those are the best where it's like you specifically have something that's like, hey, pay attention to this, and then smack,
Yeah.
right inside, and it's like it's so good.
So Wallace says, I think sound is more important than graphics, and you're absolutely right. There's no doubt
Yes.
about it. You are 100% correct about that. I mean, just the Dead Space sound team is amazing, especially for the first
Yeah.
one. They spent so much time on sound, and it really shows.
Again, there's that one room that guy, one of the Foley guys, like recorded the subway that he was in, and it just sounded horrible. And you go into the room because you've been in space, so it's very quiet, and you're like, oh, thank God I can get inside. And then you're just hit with this cacophony of like shadows and light and this sound of like what sounds like heavy machinery, but it's actually a subway of like a train going by and all that. But nothing attacks you. It's just that room, and it's just like, oh, it's kind of just unsettling, and it's so good.
Yeah, it is. Dead Space 1 was that was a really good game. I really enjoyed that. I mean, it wasn't
I'm
the
bummed it
most
turned into what it was and then died.
yeah, I mean, and even like Dead Space wasn't terribly terrifying to play because you were decently well armed. I mean, your weapons and things weren't
You could beat the whole
amazing
game
for a
with
little
your
while,
main
but like
armor and the plasma cutter.
Yeah.
yeah, that
could.
makes the game a lot more
Marshall.
scary. If
Yep. Sorry. Sorry.
I did beat the game with just the plasma cutter, but not with the base armor. That would have made things a lot
That
more
was my
difficult.
bad. Yeah. I gave him bad information and I apologized for it. Whatever.
But they did a lot of things right, and yeah, the sounds in that game were really well done and really well used, and like some of the monsters just had this awful wheezing sound that they would do, and it just was unnerving. You'd hear them, and you're like, oh God, where is it?
No,
Oh
it's the
geez.
ones that
And
explode
the
when they
explodey
smack
ones
you.
had that
Yeah.
You're like,
Yes. And
"No!"
when you hear that, you are instantly inclined to go sit my ass in a corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah. And
Hide, no.
that was
Yeah.
even the little baby things were like pretty freaky.
That was in 2, wasn't it? With
Right,
the
but they
babies
were. I was
and
gonna say,
shit?
but they
Yeah,
weren't.
but they were.
They
Yeah.
weren't as creepy as anything from the first one because at that point they were like, oh, people think babies are creepy. But like, what made
Yeah.
like the necromovers so like freaky was that they were somewhat humanoid, but they came out of humans, and you're like, oh. So it's like there was always that chance that you literally become one in one of the death sequences.
Yeah.
It basically
Yeah.
like so it's I mean that fear is always kind of there.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That was the one where it's like the really tall thing made up of a bunch of little things and a skull,
Yeah,
and then
and
like the
it's just like the
skull.
little squiggly skull. Yeah,
Yeah.
if it
And
kills
the
you, it
skull kills you,
yeah.
it pops your head off and then
Right.
puts its spine and skull into your body, turns at the camera, and then just kind of walks
Walks out,
away.
yeah, like
Walks
all like
away.
It's
limping.
so
Yeah,
good.
And
yeah.
that's another thing that makes horror games so, well, the good ones good, is that like there's that little bit of like plausibility, that it could happen. I mean, and your
Mhm.
character has to convey it. And then this kind of goes back to like Scorn, where because they said it was a survival horror, even though Marshall's saying that it's not, and I agree. I don't think it is. I kind of agree with Marshall, but
Yeah,
they're
I don't think it is at all, and I'm pretty sure it's because like they're like an Eastern European company, so it's like I don't know if they're marketing it correctly. I mean, it's who knows.
Yeah.
Mm.
But it's just if you have a character and you're following, and that's actually one of the good things about like Amnesia, Descent of the Dark, is that um, the amnesia thing is extremely overplayed. I think it definitely peaked in the Jackie Chan movie Who Am I?
Who am
Who am
Who am
I?
I?
I? But it's like you start off in the game not knowing anything as the player and as that character. So as they learn more things, you also learn more things. And so that discovery and over explanation of things feels kind of natural. Whereas like in Scorn, the guy's walking around like that's his like daily routine. He's like got my special medallion that opens garages, and he's like cool with it. And then he's got this like freaky gun. He's got this freaky gun, and
Wait, are you okay, Josh?
He's fine. I
um,
had a visitor.
he's got this gun, and it's like everything's like looks super freaky. And part of the game was saying that it just drops you
Oh,
into this area where you don't know anything, but your guy is just so cool and collected about it that it doesn't convey that fear. Whereas like Silent Hill, it's pretty spooky. And Soma starts off great because your character's freaking
Yeah,
out, and you're like, why is
Soma
he freaking
does.
out? I should be freaking out. And there's that, and then even in like in Silent or in non-silent in Half-Life 2, um, and Ravenholm, you don't say anything, but you're freaked out because the sound's phenomenal. The entire atmosphere of that level completely changes. You're fighting things that you kind of know, but you're just hearing screeches every now and then, and it's just you're not even fighting the Combine anymore. You're fighting the crab
Mhm.
people.
hold on. Let me get the dog toy away from my dog because she's driving me nuts. Hold on, guys. Keep
And
talking amongst yourselves.
and another thing about that too, that with the sound design in Half-Life 2, if you happen to look into it later, you can actually find out that the sound file, the
Okay, we're good.
sound recording of the zombie things is is a voice actor. It's playing it backwards, but it's a voice actor saying like, "Please, like, help! Please kill me." And it's that
Oh
recorded
God.
backwards,
Yeah.
and it's just like, "Oh,
Oh,
oh
that
god."
when I first heard that, I'm like, oh man, that
Yeah.
changes everything
Yeah.
about what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that
It's
was one of those
terrifying.
that, like, you find out about that later, and it makes that area that was already creepy and scary makes it so much worse.
So much worse now. Every time I kill one of them, I feel so bad. It's like,
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah.
But I mean that also helped with Ravenhole is that it introduced like two different types of head crabs. I believe it was the big dude who had a bunch of black ones on it that like took a lot of damage, and then the really fast corpse ones, which were also really
Yeah.
spooky.
Um, but yeah, no, it's like so while for me a kid laughing is spooky, like Little Sisters in BioShock.
Mm.
They're freaky because they look freaky, but also it's like children are inherently quote unquote innocent, although they're all a bunch of little sticky liars. Um,
That's
but
true.
they're
All children
they're
are assholes.
you don't think of a kid as something that would kill you by any
No.
means. It's smaller, it's more innocent, it's like naive, which is why like a movie like Pet Cemetery is so freaky because you're like that was my
Oh
son,
god,
and it's
that
like
movie.
sometimes dead is better. And
I'm evil now,
yeah, and so
baby.
it comes back. It's something that you know and is familiar and is inherently not evil. Like children laughing. Clowns used to be this case, but now everyone, I think,
Yeah.
like being afraid of clowns is like the cool thing to do. And that's why the nurses in Silent Hill 2 were so freaky, because
Yeah.
as a nurse, their profession is to help people. But it was like they're like faceless, weirdless nurse blobs that are no longer helping you. They're trying to kill
They
you.
almost kind of look like mannequins as well because of their
Right.
faceless nature and like their fleshy
And
tones that kind of give like
it's
that.
that
Yeah.
familiarity, but being slightly different, that is the most terrifying. Like people, like if you look at like a face with like no lips or no eyes, or just
Well,
like it's
that's
just
uncanny valley.
blank.
That's entirely the theory of the uncanny valley and how that works. I mean, I'm assuming you guys both know what that
Well, we
is,
know,
right?
yeah, in terms of video
Yeah.
games, but it was more for like just like the horror element of like just, it's like this is a person, you think that they're, that there's a brain in there and they're intelligent and they're able to like think and all these things, but like there's nothing there. There's no
Yeah.
expression. You can't decipher what they're thinking or anything like that, and that's freaky and unsettling, because as humans, I mean, I feel like almost every animal, it's like you kind of try and pick up on emotions around people, and when something is literally just completely blank and it shouldn't be, it's just slightly skewed enough that it should be familiar and it isn't, and that's when things get like, I think that's when real horror kind of shines.
Hmm.
Very much so. Trying to think. What is another good example of a game? Uh, one of my top 5 games of last year, Darkwood, is
Oh
a
Oh
yeah.
yeah,
really great. It's.
you made
I
a
mean,
video on it, and the video is
I made a
excellent.
video on it. Go check it
Go
out after
watch
the
the video.
podcast for anyone watching. Darkwood was by a company in I think Germany or Poland by Acid Wizard Studios.
I
And
think
it's like a
Poland.
3-man team, and it's a top-down survival horror game where it's like a bird's eye view and you're stuck in a forest, and it doesn't seem like visually like there's a lot there, but like sound wise, that game is terrifying because there's a whole day night cycle. And in the day, you go scavenge for things. And then at night, you have to come back and then board everything up and then survive. And like sound design, because you have to board everything up in your safe house to make sure things don't come in and then murder you. And you can just hear things outside. And then sometimes you can hear things inside the house, and it's like there's just so much there, and it's like, should I turn my light on? If I turn my light on and something's right outside that window, they'll then know that there's someone inside the house that they're walking around. It's like it's there's so much there, and it's so good.
That's one of the things that I liked about Resident Evil 4 is that they completely changed the Resident Evil genre, but it starts off pretty spooky, but then then it kind of goes into somewhat camp and then kind of action. But there are just a couple things in it that are great. It's like the fact that you can't aim and walk at the same time means like, do I
Mm.
turn around and try and face this horde of people, or do I run for a little bit and get some distance? And it creates that tension. And it kind of goes back with saying that you can only really be afraid of a horror game the first time you play through. In that game, it's like it doesn't try to be horror the entire time, because it's almost like it knows that that's not the case. It's like
Yeah.
the beginning is pretty scary. Leon's awesome throughout the whole thing, but then you get to like the regenerators and it's like spooky again, and then you
Ooh.
eventually beat the game, and then but
Oh
the replay value was there because it wasn't necessarily there to just scare you. It's not just a straight horror game. They
Yeah.
had the
right.
foresight to like know that that's not necessarily what you should be doing in a scary game, and then they had just terrible games for a long time. And then they came out with
Yeah.
Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, which is funny because Biohazard is the name of Resident Evil in Japan. So
And
I
I'm
wonder
pretty
if it
sure
was
in
Biohazard
Japan,
7 Resident Evil. It
exactly.
was, oh
Yes.
my god, that's
Amazing.
fantastic. So
Yeah,
they've
it was
merged the
great.
Well done.
names. They've merged them.
I will say, besides the regenerators in 4, which again, sound design goes a long way. Uncanny Valley of it looks humanish,
Mhm.
but not really. There are two. There's the scene where you're first introduced to it when it's like you grab the key. Oh crap! It just got loose in the lab, and then all of them spawn. But then the other one is there's one in the dumpster.
Oh
It's awful. High enemy
Oh
rate, by
yeah.
the way. Uh, and then also before you get to the island, there's also the fight with the left hand. Once in the castle, if you remember that giant creepy black creature thing that like hunts you, and you can optionally kill it, but it's mostly you have to get out and survive. I think that fight worked for me as being kind of spooky and creepy, is because A, for most of that castle scene, you are just fighting like lots of creepy dudes, but then you're thrown into like a pit and you survive, and it's like very dark, long corridors, and like then all of a sudden it's like you see a camera shot of like something's watching me, and then it comes after you, and then like you hit a certain point, and then it just starts attacking you, and most of the time it's like you have like a second to react to a quick time prompt, or it's like he'll smack you, and it's like, oh god, it then becomes a matter of, do I have the necessary equipment to kill it? No, crap, I need to get out alive then. And I think that part worked very well.
So that
Yeah, the regenerators are ridiculous too because they like twitch when they walk,
oh
and
yeah.
they're
Yeah,
so
or if
everything
like they're
about them is just so
if you
creepy.
knock their arms off and their legs off, they'll still kind of crawl on the ground and then leap at you with their
Oh yeah.
mouths to bite you. Oh, that's awful.
And they don't tell you how to beat them. You just get the
No,
weapon later on and then kind of figure it out. But
you get the scope.
Mhm.
yeah,
That's literally the only way you can kill them.
but Resident Evil has like they had like 3 games in a row. I mean, they basically Nemesis, Resident Evil 4, and then Resident Evil 5. And there are things that are good and bad, and all of Resident Evil 5 is mostly bad. But what I'm going to go over, like, it involves all 3 of them. And in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, you don't think you can kill the Nemesis when you first find them,
No,
but you
not at
can.
all.
I learned in speed runs you can kill them, and when I found out you could kill them, I was like, this is way less scary. I mean,
Oh
it.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
So
that's like with Amnesia though, where it's like the first time you're playing it and then a monster appears, it's like, oh, you panic. But then you realize there are set points when a monster will show up in
yeah,
certain parts of the game, and it's literally they will spawn in, and then it's like you hide, and then once you hide for a little bit, they will leave and then despawn, and it's like, oh, I don't have to worry anymore. Once you figure that out, that game becomes almost trivial.
and that's kind of what I liked
Well,
about Soma was that it started off really
yeah.
spooky, but then towards the end it was more of like an intellectual kind of philosophical game as opposed to just straight up
Yeah,
horror.
I mean,
Yeah, I actually really liked that about Soma because
yeah,
it started off and it was trying to do the amnesia thing and just like, oh god, there's monsters, you can't do anything about them, like it's scary. And then by the end you're like, okay, yeah, I'm kind of afraid of the things that are in here, but it's also just like this stuff is really
they
weird and
they
like
made
what's
a
going
good
on?
they made a good blend of Amnesia and then a Machine for Pigs, their sequel to that, which I
But
believe
they
the
didn't
Chinese
make Machine
redid.
for Pigs. A
I
different,
know,
yeah.
but they took a lot of that philosophical stuff from Machine for Pigs and then put it into Selma. And I think Machine for Pigs doesn't work because there's nothing that actually like can kill you. I don't think, maybe once or twice. But other than that, like there are very few points that like something is actually going to attack you in that game. It's a lot of like it's almost like a walking simulator in that regard.
Right. And so I mean I like that they changed it, but kind of back to the Resident Evil games. In Resident Evil 4, the QuickTime events were always done in game.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you
I mean,
literally
Mhm.
that was the game that really like brought quick time events to the forefront for a lot of games.
I would say that
That and then God
in
of
God of
War.
War, yeah.
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 But it was the crazy thing is like I don't know if it was because of a limitation or they just couldn't add the extra video files to have pre-rendered scenes, but the fact that everything was rendered in game, you literally couldn't put the controller down because you didn't
Yeah.
know when a prompt
Mm-hmm.
was going to come. But then Resident Evil
Exactly.
5 comes along and it would do a cutscene and you're like, wow, this is, clearly a cutscene. The graphics have shifted. And then it would like pause and then clearly go back to the in-game stuff and you're like, cutscene's coming up, and then you would pick up the controller and it totally, to
Mhm.
me, breaks the immersion.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they were like, it'll be nice because we've got fancy graphics now, but it actually messed up the game. I think to me, it completely got rid of any somewhat element of surprise. And
Yeah,
the game
It
wasn't,
gets rid of that layer of tension for
yeah,
sure.
it did.
very
And
much so.
so, and I mean, Resident Evil 5 was not a horror. I would not consider it a horror game at all. I don't,
That's just an action game. I
right.
mean, like one of the more intense parts of that game is just literally the beginning when you're attacked by the entire horde and you have to just survive.
Sheva,
And
Shava.
Shava,
Sheva,
Shava. But
Sheva.
like after
Ha.
that point, not really. Maybe like the chainsaw guy every now and then you might run across, but like other than that, it
Yeah.
wasn't really scary or intense
I
or creepy or whatever.
One of the other creepy parts of Resident Evil 4 for me was always the sewer section with all the little bugs and
Oh,
those like
right.
the invisible bugs that show up and you can't see them, and like
Oh
those dudes were
yeah, that's
that part was
right.
always kind of creepy for
It's
me.
always invisible dudes that are always really creepy.
Right.
especially because you know they're there, but you can't really see them. Again, I think Stalker did that very well with their bloodsuckers because they were always usually in areas that was very dark, and
Mhm.
most of the time you couldn't really see unless it's with a flashlight. And then in terms of how invisible they are, basically unless you see their eyes, you can't see them. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Um, Two other games that I wanted to bring up. One that wasn't a horror game, but it's just like the macabre and that kind of thing. But was Devil May Cry, the first one. There's a sewer section in that game too that was done really well and had lots of really good sound design and had enemies that show up that come out of the walls and attack you, and they have these like maniacal laughter, and then there's spiders and things like that. But the atmosphere of that sewer section was only used right there, and it worked really well. And it changed from it's still early on in the game too, so you're getting familiar with it, and it's got the awkward camera controls and stuff like that.
Well,
Um,
remember, if I remember correctly, the original Devil May Cry was supposed to be a Resident Evil game, but then
it
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 was,
was,
it
yeah.
literally
yeah,
turned into Devil May Cry,
yeah,
which is
it
why
was.
it kind of has that like kind of horrorish tinge to it.
Right, and I always appreciated that. But then there was g- a game like Doom 3 that was trying to be the big
The
horror
horror,
version of
yeah.
Doom, and they just made it where you couldn't see anything.
Yeah, it completely wasn't. I mean, it may have had the jump scare, but it's kind of weird when you're the Doom guy and your basic point is to kill all these demons, and so that's kind of what I thought was great about the newest Doom, is that yeah, you literally portal to hell, and all these crazy evil alien monster demon things are coming to
Things,
kill you,
yeah.
and they're fast and scary and shoot a fireball. But you start off the game naked, ripping his head, like smushing his head in half. You know what I mean? It's just
So
like,
good.
and that's the atmosphere, and that's your character never speaking, just being like, all right, he's here to kill a bunch of stuff, and he's going to.
Hmm. Well,
Um,
that was the new Doom. That was
that
Doom.
was Doom,
I'm talking
right?
about. I was talking about
Doom.
Doom
Right,
3.
and that's what I was saying. How they Doom
Oh
3
yeah,
was trying to be scary, but with a guy
yeah,
who kills everything, and it wasn't.
right.
Whereas, like in the new one, it's like, oh, it's just really
Yeah,
good.
they just threw that out. They're like, okay, yeah, it's
Dear
fine.
Esther
One
is an
more.
amazingly atmospheric game where nothing happens. So you don't even need to
Which one?
have Dear Esther.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
It's just weird and a little, and like you'll look and you're like, there's a person over there, and then you like look around and look back and like they're gone and they won't come back. It's kind of like the statue in Fatal Frame, whereas if you look at it for a while, it'll look at you, and if you turn away and look at it, it will never look at you again. It's a one time thing.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
But so you don't need to have really anything to have a atmospheric game.
You want to know a scary game before I forget, and this will probably be my last game as an example. Majora's Mask. That game
Mm,
terrifies me, and I think
yeah.
it's because you have the moon looking scary as always coming down at you. B, I don't like um time limits. Like I always feel super like tense. It's like I gotta get this done. I gotta get this done. But I mean, there's a lot of weird, creepy things in that game. Like again
Did
with
you
the
ever play
music,
Pikmin?
it's yes, I did play the original Pikmin. I didn't really consider that a scary game.
Oh no, no, no!
Or
I was just at the time
No, but
limit
it has a
thing.
timer.
oh yeah, I mean, I couldn't finish that game because again, the timer. I'm just like, I can't do it. It's why I never really got into Dead Rising because of the first that first game. I only played the first one because of the timer. It's like I don't like feeling rushed.
Hmm.
But Majora's Mask is different because you can just reset it and it's fine. But like a lot of like little cues in that game like are just really unsettling. Like again, every time you put on a mask, it's absolutely horrifying. It's like he looks like he's in pain.
And then also,
And
you're
Yeah,
putting on a mask of most of the time a dead
a
person.
dead person.
yeah,
You're putting
It's
a
like,
dead person's face on you and embodying them.
oh, it like a little child me back in the days. Like this game's horrifying.
It
My
was
God.
it was scary. And
Oh
then
yeah, very much so.
even Majora's Mask, it's like the Moon Kid basically. He's it's the masks doing this. He found a
Yeah.
body, and like the kid really doesn't have much say in it. It's just like it's
Mm-mm.
right.
just
Oh, have you seen the fan made like Moon Kid origin story trailer thing?
oh no, I have not.
Yes.
It's oh, I gotta find
Find
it.
it. But Wallace makes
Keep
a good
talking. Keep talking, I'll find it.
Wallace makes a good point. I mean, he says, I think graphics are not so important. Look at some of the old SNES RPG games. The 8-bit story was much better than most modern games, and the publishers rest on graphics. And there are arguments for and against, but I do completely agree. I mean, especially with the rise of indie games and all of the new 8-bit games that Caleb plays constantly,
Very much
because his
so.
life force depends on it.
Yes.
It's graphics are. I feel like people are. We're past that point where graphics matter
Yeah,
most and
I think
story kind
so.
of matters.
I mean, Battlefront 2 is a great example. That game looks absolutely gorgeous. But even though it sold 9 million copies, it is not a financial success for EA.
I
Which
didn't
is,
know they made a second Battlefront.
well, I mean, that was Battlefront 2. That was the
Star Wars
whole,
Battlefront 2, yeah.
yeah,
It's the whole
that was the whole loot box
$1 million
shenanigans.
worth of.
Oh, Battlefront 2. I
add-on.
thought you were talking about Hardline. Was there a second Hardline?
Oh
No, God, no.
Oh, okay.
no.
But, yeah, like, I mean, that game looks gorgeous, but that
does.
doesn't do a whole lot of it being kind of shallow and all that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
gameplay is king. Like,
I'm
atmosphere is great.
I'm
But,
all about old school graphics.
Yeah.
Yes, you
Love it.
are. Very much so.
The thing is called Majora's Mask: Terrible Fate.
Yes.
If you have the link, go ahead and post it in the chat.
I
Yes, go do
will
it.
do that.
Do it
I
right
would
now.
also recommend once we're done with the podcast, which we should probably be wrapping
Oh.
up for everyone to go watch The Bachelor.
can't-
Put that in
I
the
can't put a
description
link.
as well.
Oh. Okay.
Oh. Yeah, we'll post the link later, ladies and gentlemen. It's fine. We'll
can't
put it in.
put the
We'll put it
link
into the description of the video down below. But yeah, we should probably wrap up for everyone to go watch The Bachelor, right? Yeah.
Everyone. All of
Everyone.
us.
Everyone.
All of us.
Not just Josh. Everyone.
Oh yeah, that'll work.
Yeah.
That works.
Yeah,
Yes.
I
Awesome.
think we kind of I think we kind of hit everything. Most of the time, do we kind of get to why things fail? It's either just because they just
Kind of. I mean,
Yeah.
focus too much on it, or well, I guess we didn't. We talked about a lot of.
Well,
I think they if you try to be too far fetched with the horror, then I feel like you mentally shut off. Like you're no longer in that realm of like this is plausible and stuff could happen.
Believable.
Right? It's
Yeah.
straight up. I know
I mean-
something's going to happen because this doesn't make any sense. So anything is possible, and I feel like when you break that, it kind of.
I mean, it's also on a psychological level. I mean, that's the same argument of like why The Exorcist for a lot of people is terrifying, and that for a lot of others they laugh at it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
but that's a psychological conversation that that we do not have time for.
Right. But it also, I think it depends on the realm of the game or the setting. So in Silent Hill, having a giant monkey chase after you makes sense. Even an alien kind of makes sense in Silent Hill in a weird way. But like if you were to, in a Jaws movie, all of a sudden like Close Encounters of the Third Kind kind of happen, you're like, this doesn't make any sense. I don't know why this is happening. This doesn't make sense in the setting that I'm in. I feel like that also takes you out of like the fear.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's about it.
Yeah, that's about it.
All right, well, with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Wallace, it was awesome. I think you were probably here the longest.
Pretty sure he
Anime
was here
Weeb
the whole
was here
time.
too.
Yeah, I really appreciate
He
it.
was here too. Yeah,
Oh
appreciate
yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. We are Random Respawn, as you know. We do this every Monday.
Every Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Eastern Standard Time. That is very important, and we make the event most of the time the day of. I'm Vajasha Raptor. There's Caleb Bite.
And I am Grand Marshal.
Grand Marshal. If you guys like this, even if you didn't, like and subscribe.
Yeah,
Shameless plug. We're always trying to bring out new stuff and try to do things that you guys like. That is more than just Zelda videos. So this is one of those things. I think that's about it. Any last words before I stop streaming?
Nope.
Spooky, scary skeletons.
Spooky, I like it. Spooky.
Send shivers down my
scary.
spine.
Werewolf bar mitzvah. All right, thanks guys, and toodles.
Take care.